Welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Evan Ginzburg. Evan, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. He's my longtime friend. He is the owner of New England Championship Wrestling, running over 20 years. Sheldon Goldberg. How are you tonight, Sheldon?
Evan, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
There you go.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for being on our show tonight.
It's my pleasure. It's been long overdue. Evan and I are dear friends, so
Great.
Any chance I can get to talk to Evan and talk to you guys, I'm more than happy to do that.
So tell me about your origins in professional wrestling. What got you started in pro wrestling?
I was a fan since I was a little kid. I think I first started watching wrestling in the very early 60s. I was about 8 years old. I just saw it on TV and fell in love with it. As far as being involved in it myself, it's kind of a long story. I knew somebody that
We've got an hour, so you're pretty good.
Right.
So we started at the top of the hour, so
okay,
all right. So go ahead.
I had been involved in the entertainment business for most of my professional life, in a little bit in broadcasting and so forth, and professional theater. I did publicity for Broadway shows on tour, and I produced plays at one point. And where wrestling intersects with that is that there was a guy who had an office right down the street from where I was working in the theater district in Boston. He was the local promoter at the time. Well, not at the time, but he was the local promoter for the old Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Abe Ford was his name. And Abe had an office in the Boston Theater District in the old Steinert Piano Building, which the Steinert Piano Building sold Steinway pianos. And up above, they had a series of rehearsal rooms that you could only get to by elevator, and the elevator was the last elevator in the city of Boston that was operated by a human being. Wow. So it's an old building. And on this floor, above the piano showroom, was a series of rooms that were often used as rehearsal rooms for people that gave piano lessons, people that gave violin lessons, opera singers rehearsed there, and so forth. And at the very end of the hall was a little office, and that's where Abe Ford, the promoter, had his office. And it was kind of like a scene out of the movie Broadway Danny Rose.
Yeah.
You had all these opera singers in one room and a violin guy in another room and a piano teacher in another room. And there was Abe at the end of the hall. And he was an interesting guy. Abe didn't just promote wrestling. He promoted country music. He had a couple of venues that he booked the acts for country music. He booked strippers at one point. He was kind of an interesting guy. And, of course, I knew him from being the wrestling promoter because in the old days, Abe Ford used to have a mailing list. And you could write into him and get on this mailing list. And every month they would send you the program for the wrestling matches at the old Boston Garden. So I had been on this list for years. I'd been a big fan of wrestling. Abe Ford, I knew. So I became friendly with him. I would see him on the street, and if we were doing shows at the Colonial Theater and we had tickets to give away or whatever, I'd always call and offer him tickets and so forth. So yeah, I kind of struck up a friendship with Abe Ford. We seldom talked about wrestling, but Abe was a really good guy. He was very close to the late Walter Killer Kowalski. He helped Walter promote shows. Walter at one point had his wrestling school in the YMC Union, which was a little further up Boylston Street in Boston. But I had met Walter and kind of knew him and really didn't think much about getting involved in pro wrestling until theater was kind of going south for economic reasons. And I started dabbling in just wrestling fandom. I had a newsletter for collectors of wrestling memorabilia called Matt Marketplace and ran that for a number of years and rekindled connections in the wrestling business. And it kind of grew from there. I became friendly with a guy by the name of Tony Rumble, who was a local promoter and wrestler, and worked with him for a number of years before he passed away. And then I started New England Championship Wrestling, and I've been promoting wrestling in the Boston area and the New England area for the last 20 years. So
Sheldon, there's been a million wrestling books. Everybody and his mother has a wrestling book. I'd like to read a book on Abe Ford. He sounds like an interesting guy.
He was a very interesting guy. I don't know if you knew this, but Abe Ford and Vince McMahon Sr. had a big falling out. At one point, Abe tried to sell the territory to Grand Prix. He wanted to bring in Grand Prix wrestling because he didn't like the split that he was getting with Vince Sr. So he had kind of planned to break off from Sr., and Sr. balked, saying, well, you can't do that because the promotion is really mine. You know, the TV is my TV. The guys that you're booking are my guys, so it's really mine. And Abe Ford sued Vince Sr.
Wow.
Abe actually won the lawsuit. And in order to keep Boston as a market, Vince Sr. had to pay him out. And yeah, he paid him out on very stiff terms, I might add. And after that, it was the late Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard, and Bobby Harmon, Beautiful Bobby, that ran Boston, that were the local promoters for Boston for Abe Ford.
So Vince Sr. always has this stellar reputation, but I know from some of the boys themselves that, you know, they didn't get rich headlining WWF cards. A lot of these guys never broke $100,000 in their careers. Right. So what's your take on Vince Sr., you know, hearing this story?
You know, it's hard for me to judge because I wasn't there and on the scene. You know, wrestling promoters, like any kind of promoter of any, they're trying to get the best deal for themselves. You know, they've got to rent the building, they've got to pay all the costs, the advertising, placing the TV in the local market, and so forth. There's a lot. Being a promoter now, you know, there's a lot more to it than just, well, from the wrestler's point of view, oh, this guy didn't pay me enough. You know, it becomes, the issues are a lot different. You know, you're only making so much money. You've got to pay the building rent, and you know, over time those building rents got stiffer and stiffer, and you know, more provisions were put in. For example, you rent a major arena now, and if you're selling any merchandise in that arena, 25% off the top goes to the building. So you know, insurance, you never know. There's a whole lot of costs. So it's hard to say whether everybody was legitimately underpaid or not. You know, I'm sure he was trying to get the best deal for himself, but was he abusing the guys? I really can't say.
Well, when a Dynamite Kid, you know, drove for hours to get a $25 payoff when he was half crippled, you know, there's certain examples where it's kind of cringeworthy.
You're right. You're right about that. You know, I don't know that Dynamite Kid was getting any $25 payoffs from.
It was a TV taping. I heard he got a $25 payoff to lose the tag belt, and the guy was half crippled.
Oh man.
So
yeah, not good.
So Sheldon, can you tell me, in your opinion, what you think separates Boston wrestling and the Boston wrestling scene from, say, New York and for me here in California, the California wrestling scene? What do you think makes the Boston pro wrestling scene unique?
You're talking about currently?
Yeah, or even in the past, even something that, you know, made the Boston territory unique compared to the other parts of the U.S.
Well, you know, in the old days, we were part of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation territory and the WWF territory. So, you know, that was pretty well locked up by Vince Sr. You didn't see a lot of what they call outlaw shows or independent shows. There were some. You didn't see a lot of it. But, you know, I think the thing that made Boston and New England unique was when Walter Kowalski got out of wrestling and started training guys and had his school. His was one of the first schools around the country that was really widely publicized. You know, at least in the Boston market, every year or so there'd be at least one big story about the Killer Kowalski Institute of Professional Wrestling, and showing footage of the guys that were training there and so forth. So he really, there's a lot of guys that came out of here, and where there's wrestlers, there's wrestling. He had his own shows that he promoted. They were mostly fundraisers and sold shows and that sort of thing in later years. He did promote shows earlier, sort of with the consent of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation office. When he went on his own at one point and had his own television, Vince Sr. kind of chafed at that. But he was really the godfather of pro wrestling in this area. He launched a lot of careers. And, what happened in later years was, guys that Kowalski trained that didn't make it started training other guys. So it was almost like 6 degrees of separation. It was the guy that Walter trained is now training a bunch of guys. Then those guys started training other guys and so on and so forth. So there got to be a pretty substantial community of pro wrestlers in the area. And thus, after a while, a lot of independent shows cropped up.
Did you ever get to work with Kowalski?
Yes. Yes, I did. He was a great
Describe
man.
what that was like.
He was a great man. He was really just one of the nicest, kindest individuals you could ever hope to meet. By the time that I met him and was around him, he was pretty much a senior citizen. He was basically at the end of his run, and I think that in many ways, when Tony Rumble started promoting and later myself, it wasn't to move Walter out of the way. It was just that, the market had changed, the needs of the area had changed, the territories were dying out, and what wrestling needed around here was an actual promotion that was running its own angles and eventually angled for its own television and so forth. And, Walter was at the end of his career. He's in his, late 60s, early 70s. So, he wasn't so active as a promoter anymore. So, to bring that next level and era of guys along, you needed to have shows, and you needed to have shows that were basically angle-based and, continuity based, as opposed to just running spot shows, which is most of what the independent scene around here was before, I came along and some other of the local promoters came along.
So Sheldon, I would guesstimate that 95% plus of indie promotions fall by the wayside. You've been out there over 20 years. What are you doing right or differently than the other guys? Because most don't make it.
Well, I never get in over my head. I wanted NECW to be like your friendly neighborhood wrestling promotion. I wasn't trying to take over the world. I wasn't trying to do anything, magnanimous. We just wanted to put on good wrestling. We wanted to have a circuit of towns. We wanted to have local television. We eventually did those things. But, it was just a matter of common sense and not trying to get in over your head and not trying to bite off more than I could chew, so to speak.
So, Sheldon, name me, first of all, 5 things that go into making a great card. And can you name me 5 things that will kill a match, that will kill a card?
Okay, 5 things that make a great card. Well, you got to have great talent, for one. You have to have, you have to market it competently. You have to make the fans feel like they want to go. You've got to reach out to them constantly. It's not just, putting out a bunch of flyers or a bunch of posters or ads in a paper or social media posts. You've got to promote a number of different ways all the time. You've got to cultivate your audience. You've got to make the guys that you are promoting matter. One of the things that set my company apart from everybody else when I started was I had a very different take on what I wanted to do. I wanted to concentrate on local wrestlers. I didn't want to do what had passed for independent wrestling here in the past, which was they get 1 or 2 big name headliners and all the rest to be local guys, because then everybody's coming to see the main event and nobody cares about the undercard. I wanted to make you care about everybody on the card. I wanted to set up angles and programs and get people invested in the individuals that they're coming to see month after month. So it was lower overhead for one, but it was just common sense. You want to make people care about what they're seeing. So if you give guys promo time, if you give them match time, if you set up, angles and programs, if you give them, originally, we were the ones that invented putting matches online. Before there was YouTube, before there was Facebook, before there was social media of any kind, we were doing weekly shows online, taped originally in a guy's wrestling school in a old mill building, and putting the matches online to promote our upcoming cards and get people interested in who the talent were and so on and so forth. That proved to be something that worked out very, very well for us and prepared us for eventually going on television. But so there's that. I think it's important as a promoter to have a relationship with the audience. I always thank people for coming. I always try to treat the fans like they were valued people. Always tried to have a program, something that they could take home with them, that would be sort of a souvenir of the matches and so forth. So I think it's to try to count off 5 things. One, you have to have good talent. You have to have the ability to invest in that talent in terms of getting the fans to know who they are. You've got to value the fans and give them a good experience. Give them an experience that makes them feel like they want to come back. If you can't do those things, you're not going to last. I think one of the reasons that NECW lasted so long is that I always tried to be good to the fans. I always tried to give them at least their money's worth, if not more than their money's worth. Those are very important things. I always tried to promote our business as a brand and to make people feel like, hey, this is something I want to come back and see again. So I don't know if that's 5 things, but
no.
That's,
and then I'd like to know 5 show killers. What you would consider
5 show killers. Okay, 5 show killers would be not really managing the matches. I see a lot of companies that throw out too many matches because they want the guys to, just get out there. That's no good. It's a meritocracy. It's not a democracy. It's not, a couple of guys showed up, extra guys showed up, let's just put them in there. No. You've got to earn your way onto a card. It's got to be, you can't just throw something out for the sake of throwing it out. Sometimes you have matches that are put out there just so the fans can get to know the people that are in them for when you do something with them later. But the idea of just throwing guys out there to throw them out there, that's no good. Shows that go too long. Like Shakespeare said, brevity is the soul of wit. Not that the card should be brief, but it should be just the right length. And it should build properly. You should build towards your main event. You shouldn't throw everything out there at 90 miles an hour, because the people get bored with that too. Show killers are... I had partners at one time that hated the fans. They just had contempt for the people that would come, to call them marks, and I hated that. I absolutely hated that with a passion. If you don't appreciate the people that are giving you money, what have you got left? You got nothing left. So I always hated that. I always tried to show the fans that they were appreciated. To have contempt for the people that are paying their money to keep you in business is a sure way to be out of business. Show killers.
Can I add a few while Sheldon's thinking?
Yeah.
Don't have the ring show up 2 hours late. Don't have the fans sitting there twiddling their thumbs for 2 hours.
Right. Okay. Starting on time.
Don't have 17 ticket sellers on at the beginning of the show, with no gear, who don't know what they're doing. Right. Don't have 17 matches. I once saw a steel cage be put up after midnight. After midnight, they set up a steel cage. Terrible. And the show is supposed to start at 7 or 8 o'clock. Okay? I could go on and on and on with this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's
remember the old days,
sometimes.
Evan. You remember the old days of the WWF TV tapings when they did the syndicated TV? They'd be doing 3 or 4 weeks of TV at a shot. There'd be 19 matches,
Right?
and the card would go 3.5 hours. And yeah, it was for TV and all that, but you just wear the people out. You can't do that.
Exactly.
You know?
And have a microphone that works, because otherwise it's just a pounding in your head. And don't let every guy on the card get on the mic, because some of them can't
Absolutely.
talk. You know,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I've been around indies for 50 years, and you know, they know how to kill a crowd.
Exactly. Yep. Those are all things.
And I would also say you don't need 4 3-man matches on the card either.
Right.
You know,
the same finish in 4 matches in a row. You know, that's another thing that kills a crowd.
Yes. Don't throw the battle royale in the middle there, halfway through, and have it be a Royal Rumble thing so that everybody gets on the card, but it takes another hour and a half to wrestle that out.
The other thing is, don't always imitate what you see on TV. You know?
Yeah.
I hate that. I call that wee-wee wrestling. You know, guys that try to do everything they see on Monday night and on Friday night on Raw and SmackDown, that's wee-wee wrestling. Don't be you. Don't be somebody else. Don't try to be WWE, because you're not. You're not going to be WWE.
It is fun to bring back an ancient angle that nobody's done before.
If you dress it up with new people, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's old is new.
Spin.
If you can do shtick that people haven't seen in so long, and that it hasn't been done, like nobody does a rolling headlock. Well, if you do it now, you might actually be able to sell it enough to actually make people buy into it.
Right, sure. To a large extent, everything old is new again.
Also, know your audience. I mean,
yeah.
I saw a indie show at a church, and who's in the main event? Joey Ryan doing all his shtick, and I'm watching the priest watching Joey Ryan, and I'm like, something's not right here. He's doing dick flips and everything.
Right.
Yeah. So you have to know your audience and know the venue, and if you have a room full of kids, don't be cursing, and you have to know your crowd.
Exactly.
You don't really have to work blue. I mean, that's one thing I've realized too, that you look back at some of the greats. Like, for instance, you were talking about the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard was able to really generate a huge amount of heat, yet he never worked blue. He didn't have to swear. Now, I know it's a different audience from a different era. I still think the Grand Wizard shtick, if applied today, could work very well and get people to go crazy, because I did that myself pretty much as a manager when I was in APW.
Right. Well, the role of managers has been sorely underused. Not everybody should be handed a mic.
But it's a kayfabe thing, that has made people say, well, you don't really need a manager in there to cheat and to distract the referee. And other than Shane McMahon, most of the smaller guys don't want to take the kind of pounding that, managers were taking for a while.
Right.
So, the bigger guys were tearing people like me into little tiny pieces, and it got pretty tough to maintain that after a while. I took some serious bumps in the early 2000s, and I after a number of other injuries that I've sustained, it's not something that I would recommend to anybody.
Right. No, I hear you.
Is there? Did you ever want to get in the ring or do any actual managing or anything like that? Be involved in any?
No.
That's great. No, it's good. It's tough when the promoter wants to be part of the shtick. That's when things go usually overboard, and you have owners and bookers managing guys, and who becomes the world champion, for a year straight, right?
Right. Now I did the announcing, the play-by-play and that sort of thing, because I had to.
You did play-by-play, huh?
Yeah, and I do the sort of commissioner type thing where, I'm out there to make a ruling or whatever. But that's it.
Nobody's body slammed you.
I really didn't want to do that, to be perfectly honest with you. The commentary, that's fine, because that's part of promoting. That's part of getting people over and telling the stories and, getting people invested in what they're seeing. But beyond that, I wasn't really interested in any of that.
Who is your color guy?
It varied depending on the period of time. Sometimes I just do the commentary myself.
Oh my God, that's the hardest.
It was always post-produced. The way we were doing television at one point, we were doing a half hour every week, and many times I would have to work that around a regular job. So, I might be voicing matches over late at night or whatever. So, having to coordinate with another person to do color oftentimes just wasn't even possible. So, but we made the best of it. We always had backstage announcers that were doing the interviews and that sort of thing. So it kind of broke it up.
Oh, the most fun I ever had was doing color commentary. It's the hardest job in wrestling that I ever had to do was be promoter for one show, which was like proved to me, like running a restaurant, I would never want to do it again in my entire life. That is so hard to do, and so much stuff gets put on your plate, and you have to spin so many plates and answer constantly to everybody. People who are like doing everything from saying the ring truck hasn't arrived to someone saying, I forgot how to tie my shoelaces. You have to like deal with every problem under the sun. And I don't know how you can do that. But the next hardest thing is to do play-by-play. I think it's really hard to do play-by-play commentary for matches, even post. You have to remember everybody's names right. There's a lot of moves to remember. You just don't want to say, there's a reverse bulldog headlock for 3/4 of the match, Or, oh, look at that move. Oh, I bet that hurts. You have to come up with a variety of things to say. And when you do it by yourself and you don't have somebody to bounce it off of, it becomes, I've had to do a couple matches commentary solo myself. And I just felt I just wanted to blow my brains out at the end of the match. I was like, that is so horrible. If it ever gets on the air, I will probably never work in wrestling again. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I did it because I loved doing it, and I knew that if it was going to get done, I'd have to do it myself. I didn't have anybody else that I could rely on that could really pick up the mantle. And as a good friend of mine said to me, no one's going to be more passionate about it than you, because it's your business. I had to stand and deliver, so to speak. If you're putting something out there, you got to go, and I got to be the one to sell it. And no one sold it with more passion than I did. So, I was always glad to do it, because I felt like by doing it, I was able to do the things that needed to be done. Many times guys get behind the mic and they just want to hear the sound of their own voice. They just want to hear them, say whatever they're going to say without bothering to actually promote the company or promote the guys that are in the matches and tell the stories of the matches. I mean, it's called a promotion for a reason. You're promoting something. You're promoting someone. You're getting people to care about what it is that they're seeing. And people often lose sight of that. They focus on technical names for matches, moves, or technical names for whatever, and they forget you're telling a story. It's really not as complicated as it sounds. You're telling the story of the match.
Sheldon, let me throw this out there. I saw one of your musical productions in New York, and I was very impressed. And I'm jaded. I mean, I'm a Broadway guy, and you put on a beautiful musical production. I forget the name. It's been like 20 years, but
might have been another Saturday night.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yep. So you've invested 20 plus years and thousands upon thousands of hours into pro wrestling.
Right.
In hindsight, had you nurtured a musical, theatrical show instead, do you ever look at your life and think, what if I took a different path?
No. I did theater as long as I could. I did it until the economics of it changed to the point where I didn't think it was theater for the people. And it got to the point where the theater rents, the theater owners controlled everything. The price of tickets became obscene, in my opinion. And I just thought it wasn't for the people.
This was before Hamilton.
Yeah,
Yes.
way before Hamilton, right. I mean, I remember when we balked at a $20 ticket, a $20 top on a ticket. I mean, I remember there was big debate. Oh, tickets are going to be $20. Who's going to go now? I mean, now $20 is a bargain. $20, you can't.
You won't buy popcorn.
Yeah, exactly. But it became something that was for the privileged, and I just didn't see a future in it. I saw the theater owners making all the money, and the odds are just not good unless you own the theater. And I wasn't in a position to own a theater at that point, so I don't have any regrets. I really don't.
I have a friend who's written, a full-length musical, and it takes years upon years to nurture it. People have no idea, and there's no guarantee it's ever going to get to Broadway or make money. In fact, the odds are against it ever making money. So
exactly.
It's a tough business.
I know guys that have produced plays that, they've ditched hundreds of thousands of dollars in one night because the reviews were bad or whatever. You have and the other thing too is, you produce plays, you got to put it in a theater. You can't put it in a high school gym. You can't put it in a VFW hall.
Right.
Your options for venues are very limited. And if you're not the Schubert organization or the Niederlander organization or Jansen or whatever that own the Broadway theaters, you are shit out of luck. You work with them whether you like to or you don't. You don't really have a choice.
Right.
So it became a limited. It's a closed shop, I should say. I think that's the best way to put it. It's a closed shop. I had dreams of being a Broadway press agent. And there's a union, the Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers.
No wonder why you had a tough time getting that.
Right,
out.
exactly. Tongue twister. So anyway, here in Boston, I worked on the pre-Broadway tryout of a musical called Woman of the Year that starred Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And the late Harry Gardino. The guy that they had sent up to Boston to do the local PR had a big beef with Lauren Bacall, and they fired him. I was working in the theater answering the phones, and I'd help with the PR every now and then, but they had nobody to come up here and babysit the show. And I volunteered. I said, I'll do it. Whatever you want to pay me, I'll do it. So they put me on it, and it was a great experience. And the guy who was the press agent of record, who had the union contract, because every Broadway show has to have a union manager and a union press agent. So the union manager was this guy named Merle DeBusky, who was the president of the union. So I bail him out in Boston and do the PR for this, and I did a very good job. I got along with everybody. I got along with Lauren Bacall. I got along with the stars. I set up the interview, took people here and there, and so on and so forth. And I said to this guy who's the president of the union, I says, listen, I did this for you for cheap. I was happy to do it. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you help me get in to the union? And he said to me, you are never getting in the union. It's a closed shop. Get it? You will never get in. You're never going to get a union card. I won't help you. I won't do anything for you. Forget it. Get out. Go do something else with your life.
Wow.
And that's when I started to become a producer. This son of a bitch isn't going to keep me out of anything.
Right.
So, I became a producer after that.
Why do you think he said that? Why do you think he said that?
Well, because it's a closed shop. I mean, it was a handful of press agents that made all the money and had all the union contracts and so forth. I mean, he didn't even say, well, if you want to start by working in my office or doing this or doing that or working in this other guy's office or, start by, on the ground floor or whatever. He didn't even offer me that. He just said, forget it. It ain't going to happen for you.
Because one of the sort of pet issues that we have here on the show is that we've talked a lot about wrestlers and them forming a union in the WWE, or at least being treated as Screen Actors Guild members for the WWE. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know, given your experience there, what your thought is about, the unionization of pro wrestlers or treating them as actors.
Well, as far as WWE goes, that's a different story from independent wrestling or whatever. I think that the WWE talent have a valid case for being unionized. And this comes from somebody who's a promoter. So, I mean, that's a pretty big statement. It's not like somebody who's, oh, yeah, sure, they should pay me more money. I'm do this, I do that. No, as a promoter, I think it's just. You want to be just. You don't want to abuse people. You get the most out of people by being right with them. You don't get the most out of people by abusing them. WWE has a phenomenal business. They are a phenomenally vertically integrated company that does tremendous business, and it should reflect down to the talent. The talent have a right to say, now, especially with the network, there's no big pay-per-view payoffs anymore. The whole structure of how these guys get paid is changing. And, nothing against Vince McMahon, nothing against, a lot of this is uncharted territory for them too. But I think the talent, in short, do have a point. There should be some protections for them. There should be some guarantees. There should be some economic justice for them, in a situation like that.
Let me just add, if you watch a 3-hour Raw, a lot of it is comedy, a lot of it is skits, a lot of it is memorized promos, which is acting.
Right.
And, Vince is embarrassed by the word wrestling. He doesn't even like to use the word wrestling.
You're right.
So if this is sports, quote, entertainment, then, these guys are acting and doing bits. So I don't see any issue with them being in SAG, Screen Actors Guild or whatnot. I don't see it.
I think you're right. I mean, to me, that's not pro wrestling. What they're doing is not pro wrestling.
And it's not entertainment.
Sports. Well, yeah, right. Well,
it's awful.
Right,
yes.
Right.
I got a couple other questions for you.
Sure.
Tell me, in your opinion, what the best card that you've put together at New England Championship Wrestling. Your favorite card that you've put together.
My favorite card was a tournament that we did called the Iron 8. And that was the one from 2014, I believe. It was a one-night tournament. We crowned a new champion. Our champion at the time had suffered an injury, had wrecked his knee, and we needed to replace him as champion. And we had this tournament coming up. So usually the winner of the tournament gets a trophy, which they still got a trophy, but we also, in addition to winning the trophy, they became the champion. So we did sort of a Cinderella story and made a guy by the name of Brad Hollister, who was a young up-and-coming wrestler. He became champion that night, and top to bottom was just a great card. It really was a great card. Told a great story. And a lot of people who went to that card tell me that it was the best card they've ever been to, the best live event they've ever been to.
Sheldon, of all the people you've nurtured over the years, tell us about a few that have, gone on to bigger and better things.
Oh, yeah. There's a long list. I think the guy at the top of that list would be Eddie Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
Who's with Impact Wrestling, who's a champion in Ring of Honor, two-time champion in Impact, was champion in Pro Wrestling Noah. Just a great talent. Had a lot of great matches early in his career with us. His wife, Alicia Edwards, who wrestled for us as Alexis Nevaeh, she was our women's champion for a very long period of time. We used to have an all-women's promotion that we did. So she was great. She started this little girl who Didn't want to cut promos. Didn't want to, didn't want to be on, do public stuff. Was very nervous in front of a camera, whatever. And she just blossomed into a great talent. You see her on Impact Wrestling now. If you watch some of her older stuff, we've got it up online. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. She was terrific. You can see how she grew and progressed over the years into being a great talent. So
there you go.
Yep.
What was the name of the women's promotion?
Well, Women's Wrestling.
Okay. Well, yeah. And tell me, if you could book a card with anybody from history at all, what would your main event be?
Wow. A match I always wanted to see but never took place. Bruno Sammartino versus Dory Funk Jr.
They never had that, ever?
Never, ever.
Wow.
They never faced each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And what would you be? What would you have as a tag team main event?
Tag team main event. Wow. I have to say the greatest tag team match I ever saw was the Midnight Express versus the Fantastics.
Oh yeah, that was great.
In the Boston Garden. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I used to see Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express over and over and over again, and it was always great.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that would make for a pretty good card. Is there anyone that you would have liked to have booked in New England Championship Wrestling from New England that you wish you could have booked or gotten on one of your shows?
Pretty
like
much.
Kevin Sullivan, for instance.
Well, Kevin Sullivan, yeah. We never booked Kevin. Although I knew him. He used to come up for Tony Rumble all the time. Yeah, that would have been fun. One of the things that we wanted to do at one point, and we never got a chance to do it, was my friend Howard Brody, who you know, Evan.
Yeah.
Had introduced me by phone to Gary Hart, who I was a big fan of Gary Hart.
Oh, he was great.
Great manager, great booker, so on and so forth. So what we wanted to do was, at the time, our kid that was wrestling for us was Rocket Fred Curry Jr., who was the son of Flying Fred Curry and the grandson of Wild Bull Curry.
Right. So
what we wanted to do, I wanted to bring Gary in to have Gary's son wrestle Freddie, and with the fathers in the corner.
Huh.
We wanted to do it. We never got a chance to do that because Gary passed away before we could make it happen. Yeah, which was kind of sad, but it was kind of something that I really wanted to do that would have been fun. Just because I wanted to hang out with Gary Hart and listen to all of his old stories.
Sheldon, where do you rank Kowalski among the all-time great heels? He's got to be in the top 5 or 10.
Your top 3, I think.
Top 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Him, the original Sheik.
Buddy Rogers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny, I was talking about this on another podcast not too long ago, how the guys around here locally, the younger ones, didn't get it about Walter. They didn't they just hang. Oh, Walter, how you doing? Walter.
Because he was so down to earth.
Yeah, they didn't realize that this guy was one of the greatest of all time. They didn't realize that this guy, they were in rarefied air when they were in his presence.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to say to myself, here's this guy, sweetheart of a man, who literally, talk about guys whose names are synonymous with professional wrestling. Walter's in that category. I mean, his very name is synonymous with professional wrestling. I don't think the younger guys really got it. They didn't understand the level of star that Walter really was.
I saw him wrestle Bruno. I mean, he was on top even when he was, in his 50s.
Yeah.
So, Sheldon, because you're so tied in with the theater, musical arts, and wrestling, the one common backbone between all of that is performing.
Right.
And the human need to perform. And what is your take on that, and what people are willing? I think that was what I was a friend and sometimes enemy of Roland Alexander, was the promoter of All Pro Wrestling here in California.
Okay.
And I got to see inside of his eyes a few times and how difficult his life was as a promoter, because you're sort of in charge of making people's dreams happen.
Right.
As a promoter, you have their dreams in your hands, and you can make those dreams happen or you can break those dreams. Being in that position, how did you decide, I'm going to push this guy, or I'm going to have to tell this guy he's not going to make it? He's just, just not going to be right for this show. We're never going to be able to use him as a wrestler. How did you make that decision? And then how did you tell, first of all, guys they were going to make it? And how did you tell guys that weren't going to make it? What was your approach?
It's largely instinct. Instinct tells you whether a guy has the charisma, has that it factor, or they don't. I can count on my fingers of one hand the number of guys who I thought had that potential but didn't live up to it.
Sheldon's
to me
freezing
in an interview one time. What's that?
Oh, you were freezing for a second. We missed.
Okay, I'm sorry. Jim Ross had once said to me in an interview that, for the most part, what happens with a talent is what's supposed to happen. If they have that work ethic, if they have that innate ability, it'll eventually come out. If they don't, it won't happen for them. I think in my case, I'm always trying to build somebody. What can I do to build this guy? What can I do to bring out what's already there? What kind of story can we tell? What kind of platform can we give them? I think more important than anything else is just giving people the stage to perform. The good ones, the ones that really have it, really have the chops for it, they're going to find a way to get that out there. All they need is the platform and the encouragement to go out there and do it.
And another thing we didn't really mention is, in wrestling, there's a lot of nepotism and cronyism. You really have to detach yourself from all of that. Just because somebody's your cousin doesn't make them a wrestler. You know,
it's business, pure and simple.
It's a business. Sure.
Yeah, you have to. I wasn't one to really hang out with the boys. My role was to be the boss, and that's what my role was, and I took it seriously. Not that I hated being around the talent, because I didn't. In many cases, there were guys that I wish I spent more time with and not less. I wish I had more of an interpersonal relationship with many talents. But that is what it is. There's guys that I knew sometimes above other people that they were going to make it big, and they just needed the encouragement, and they just needed a gentle shove in the right direction. So I always felt that I was fortunate to be able to work with the people that I've been able to work with. I never looked at it like I was doing them a favor. I looked at it like, if you've got talent, you want to do something, you really have it in you to go out and be something, then it's my privilege to be able to help you to do that. I always looked at it with gratitude. I didn't look at it like I'm doing this guy a favor, Yeah, I think that's the way you have to look at it. You have to look at it with a degree of humility. I always felt that I had that. So
there you go.
So tell me what your plans are for your federation in this time of COVID, and how you think that we're going to try to get out of it.
Well, I think that in the short term, what we've been doing is just putting out content from our library of stuff, because we can't do any new events. This year's our 20th anniversary. So we put out a 20th anniversary collection, 20 matches that sort of encapsulate 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling, which is on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is NECW Wrestling on YouTube. And so we've done that. We've been producing a podcast called Regeneration, which is all about the last 20 years of our company and where we're going to move from there. And going forward, what I want to do is get our own building, and so that we can promote on a full-time basis and have an atmosphere that kind of lives up to what we want to do as a promotion. I think that our biggest stumbling block as a company has been not being able to find a venue or venues that are really conducive to producing television. I always thought that as far as the booking goes and the storytelling goes, we had a very strong product, but we're doing these in small buildings in front of folding chairs and on major broadcast TV. That's not going to work. I have a very good relationship with people at New England Sports Network, which is a partnership with the Boston Red Sox and the Boston Bruins. And they really liked us and really wanted to do business with us, but not if we're going to be running in a VFW hall in front of, 200 folding chairs. That's not going to play on their air. So what we want to do is we want to now, instead of trying to innovate the wrestling, is now we want to innovate the environment. We want to create a venue that lives up to what we want our in-ring product to be, and have the ability to be able to run when we want, how we want, and be able to run at a level that allows us to do some really high-quality broadcast TV. So that's what's on the agenda going forward for us.
That's great.
Is to get our own place and control our own environment for once.
That would be amazing. You could probably really do some quality television, set up a real lighting, and your lighting
Exactly.
is always the.
Yeah.
I remember when we were trying to do. I was helping to run a promotion called California Championship Wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and we did one of the earliest Comcast on-demand shows, and our lighting was terrible. It was just awful, muddy, and just could never get it right. So, because we just couldn't control it and set up the lighting the way we wanted to. So I think if that's something you guys can take control of, that might be great. And, the NWA showed how studio-based wrestling can still be exciting and fun.
Absolutely.
You don't need a huge audience. I think now we've all been trained to understand that you don't need the 60,000 person audience to enjoy wrestling, but you got to have something.
Absolutely. Yep.
You can't just have television screens lined up.
Right.
You get
Wrestling needs that live audience.
Yeah, even if it's a small one, one
Right.
that you can control. I think that's another lesson that we've learned from COVID, that you just
Right.
got to have something. They don't have to be a million people, but you got to have people in the crowd
Right.
that know how to generate noise and generate excitement for the wrestlers to interact with and to be
Right.
able. That live element just can't be surgically removed. And
Amen.
still have the same patient. It's like taking the brain out of the monster. You
Right.
just have Frankenstein lying there on the table. You gotta,
Right.
you need more than that.
Absolutely.
And I would love it if you ever got the studio up and running. I would love an invitation to come out to
Absolutely.
see
Yeah.
your
Love
shows.
to have you. Both of
Ironically, even though we call this Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast, and I've driven across the United States twice, and my wife is from Boston, I've never been to Boston.
you. Really?
Yes. So
you're going to make it out here.
Now I have a reason to go, so I can go visit your hopefully your new studios. I'll have to make a
We'll have
Wrestling
to
Coast to Coast, take a bus across the United States and stop at all these different places that we've talked to on the
Right.
show and do a show from there, one a week as I go across.
We
I don't
had
know
a
how-
guest on from China last week.
Yeah, exactly. In El Salvador. I'm not sure how to do El Salvador. We'll have to work on that one. But
Right.
So anyway, we're almost through today's show. It's so hard to believe. It seems like these hours we start it and we start getting into all these things and all of a sudden it's time to end. But I want to make sure you have enough time to fully promote New England Championship Wrestling and everything that the fans need to know to get in touch with you and
Plug
to
anything you want to plug, Sheldon.
anything you want to
All
plug
right.
or talk about.
Well, a must-see is the NECW 20th Anniversary Collection on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is NECW Wrestling, 2 W's there. It's on YouTube. It's 20 matches that encapsulate 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling. There are 17 major stars before they became famous in that collection.
Go ahead and throw some teasers out on.
Well, one of the things is the very first match for the girl who eventually became Sasha Banks. Her very first professional match is part of that collection.
Nice.
Everybody from Claudio Castagnoli, the artist now known as Cesaro, Pepper Parks, Eddie Edwards, just a tremendous array of talent.
What was Cesaro like to work with?
He was great.
Yeah. Super nice guy.
Yeah, he seems like he just hasn't gotten what he deserves in the WWE, and it makes me so unfortunate because he really should have the talent to be the champ, for a little bit of a stretch. Now, I think Vince, if he put the belt on him, would feel like, oh, I gave in to pressure, so I'm not going to do it. It's almost like Vince not giving Cesaro a push is sort of his statement to the fans saying, you're telling me to push him? Well, I'm not going to push him to show you who has the power here.
He's had tag belts.
Right, but not himself. Not, the focus on himself as world champ. Right.
We have another series on YouTube called NECW Legendary, which is another series of matches and promos and bits and so forth. Bobby Fish is in that. There's a tremendous match on there between Bobby Fish and Eddie Edwards.
Yeah, those guys are great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a phenomenal match, as good as anything you'll see on TV today. Fergal Devitt, the artist now known as Finn Balor, is in there. He worked for us before he became famous. In fact, I was the one that introduced him to Simon Inoki and got him into the New Japan dojo to get him over to Japan. So, yeah, he spent a number of months here with us and came back as part of an NWA World Title Tournament, and that match is in there as well. So, Alexis Nevaeh, who is the artist now known as Alicia Edwards. So there's a lot of great stuff there. I'm very, very proud of that. You can see how John Cena, there's a match of John Cena's before he became famous. John Cena versus Frankie Kazarian. So there's a lot of great stuff that we've been fortunate enough to have been able to present over 20 years. And it's in this collection, and I think it's well worth your time to watch. It's 20 matches, so it's like about 3.5 hours worth of stuff. But it's worth your way to wend your way through it as you can. It's well worth it. There's a lot of great stuff there. I think you'll be impressed.
Great. Yeah, and if people want to get in touch with you at all through social media,
my name's Sheldon Goldberg on Facebook. The company's Facebook is NECW Wrestling. On Twitter, we're at NECW, and our website is necw.tv.
That's fantastic.
And let me just add, a while ago, I wrote a piece for Pro Wrestling Stories about the unsung heroes of professional wrestling. And Sheldon, I put right in there, front and center, because Sheldon's been out there 20 years, and 20 plus years, and you could hear, some of the people he's nurtured and helped, give a showcase to, and much respect for surviving. I mean, most promotions don't make 20 years. They're lucky to make 20 months.
Well, that's true, and it doesn't get any easier. It does not get any easier.
And with COVID, it got a million times harder. So I'm glad to see that you're going to survive. I look forward to you guys surviving and hopefully thriving when all this gets better.
Thank you. I've got more miles in the rearview mirror than I have in the windshield, but I'm looking to make this go on beyond me. So I want to leave it in good hands. I want to leave it in good shape. Well, I think wrestling needs a lot of old school foundation today to take it forward.
Yeah, that's a good sentiment. Well, we'd love to have you on as a guest in the future. Especially, when, you guys are ready to kickstart your federation again, and think of us as a promotional vehicle for you. Hopefully you can get started maybe, post summer of this year, and we can all have hope. That'd be great.
Well, I'm very much appreciate Evan is a very valued friend. We've been friends for many years. He's somebody that I dearly love and respect. You've done so much for so many people. I'm honored to know you and just all the stuff that you've done.
Thank you.
You're a great one. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, Sheldon's my buddy, and it's great talking for an hour. So
yes.
And
our hour is just about up. So thank you so much for being part of this podcast, and we really look forward to having you as a guest sometime in the future. Until then, pleasure. Good night, everybody, and have a great evening. Good night.